All right, welcome. Let's do some Q&A. It's been a little while since we did this, and I've been having a lot of questions on the channel lately, so we're going to jump right into it. Audio Janitor, like the name. This is on the last video I did with the A74 for real estate photography at 927. Really nice work. I haven't looked, but I'm assuming you mean the interior video that I showed on that. How did you get your first few gigs? I tried and no callbacks, IM emails, etc. So thank you for the question, Audio Janitor, and thanks for the compliments on the video. I've been over this before on the channel, but, you know, giving you the benefit of the doubt, you may not have seen that. I was a real estate agent for several years before I got into real estate photography full-time, and so I already knew all of the people. I didn't struggle at first, but I do have a series of videos called How to Make Your Real Estate Photography Business Explode in 2022, and I will leave a link to, I always get this wrong, this side right there, to the one that specifically goes over how to get your first real estate clients by way of doing sales meeting presentations in these different brokerage offices. So take a look at that, and I hope it helps you out. Jim B, does the A1 have focus stacking? I can't find it anywhere. You know, I don't know. I've never tried. If by focus stacking what you mean is it, I'm assuming that it would be done within the JPEG engine in the A1, so it's going to take a bracket at different focal points and then stack them all together. I don't know. That's not something that I typically do. The few times that I have done it, I've just done it in Photoshop. And it's really easy to do in Photoshop. I would have to figure it out again, but it's like blend by focus or whatever. Glory to God Productions. Good to see you, Ty Cassette. I have had a problem nailing focus on the 12mm 0D lens when I owned it. Thanks for the video. Yeah, the 12mm 0D is a very crude lens. It's good for what it is in that it corrects rectilinear distortion very well, but it's not going to get sharp. The best I've ended up using the 12mm 0D is by stopping it down to about 5.6 or so, and then locking it off at around 4 meters. So it can go past infinity. So if you just put it on infinity, that's not necessarily meaning you're going to get everything in focus, because it does adjust for like atmospheric conditions and things like that. So it can go past infinity. I would lock, for real estate, I would lock it off at 4 meters, f5.6, and that's probably how I would use that lens. Here's a good one. Takuden. This was on a short that I did about why I continue to prefer the Sony Alpha 1 over the A74 for real estate photography. And the main reason I said was because the Alpha 1's range for the wireless tethering is so much more robust, and it really is. You know, that's not to say the A74 has a bad range, because it doesn't. It has a much better range than the cameras before it did. So the A7R4, for instance, which I used primarily for a couple of years when it was new, the range would drop out after, if you've got interior walls in between, after really only about 20 feet or so. You couldn't reliably, you know, depend on it to go past then. The A1 really changes all that. The reason that I don't use cam rangers is because I don't have to. So especially with the A1, I've been in situations where I have separated myself from the camera by at least 100 feet, and it was still rock stable. And so that range to me is far enough to do everything that I do. But more to your question, though, why wouldn't I, if that's my reason to use the A1, why wouldn't I take a cheaper route and go the A74? Well, you'll notice I said that's my main reason to use the A1. There are a lot of other reasons that the A1 is a better camera for this than is the A74. Primary of which that I can think of is the ability to shoot 1/400th of a second on the mechanical flash sync. And that is pretty useful for real estate, actually, because that means you can crank your ISO up. A1 is a super clean camera, so you can crank your ISO up to get yourself more flash power. And then, since now your windows will be blowing, you can go all the way to 1/400th to get your window exposure down, balance out your flash with your windows. And so the A74 is 1/250th of a second. Other flagships out there, like the Canon R3, is only 1/250th of a second. And so, you know, it's the little things like that too, even amongst the company of the R3s and the Z9s and stuff out there, that I believe the A1 is still just the most beastly camera on the planet. Some heckler. I can't tell if this guy's a heckler or not. I can't tell if he's speaking sarcastically or whatever. I get him. Here is not a heckler. Samson Colburn. This is exactly the kind of content I'm looking for in a real estate photography vlog. Thanks so much. Thanks, Samson. I appreciate getting comments like that. Fina Bentley Chimera says, you didn't say anything about the rolling shutter problem on the A7 Mark IV. Does it make a difference in shooting real estate video? Yeah, you're right. I didn't say anything about the rolling shutter. I didn't notice it when I was shooting the real estate video, and I think that's because, and I know this is true about the A7 IV, it does have a slow read speed, which could lead to rolling shutter artifacts, you know, the jello-y thing. But I have seen that, and this is the same reason why it even crops in at 4K 60. The Super 35 area of the sensor, when you use it like that, is a much faster read speed than full frame. And so, especially with real estate, when we're stabilized on a gimbal, we're not moving very quickly. You know, it's not like we're shooting sports or motorsports or something like that. I don't think you'll have a problem, and I didn't notice it when I was using it, so I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, this one I actually wanted to address specifically when I was going to make this video. It's by Image One Nation, and it was a comment thread on the A7 IV with the 12mm Zeiss to it, and the conversation went to, well, what about some of the new APS-C Sony lenses coming out? So the 10-20, I think one of them is the 11mm prime. 11mm prime is the one that everybody's kind of interested in because it's a 1.8 lens, and so it's nice and fast. And after a few comments, he writes, this is Image One Nation, so I just placed an advance order for the 11mm 1.8, but really wanted to grab one of the power zoom wides. Is there a way around the f4 and crop for the 10-20? And can I possibly use the 1635 and 4K 30 to get a similar slow-mo? There's a lot to unpack there. So that's why I wanted to answer this on this video. Let me start with the last thing that you asked. Doing 4K 30 and then dropping it to a 24p timeline, I think it's like 85% or something like that. That's what we all did before we could start shooting 4K 60. And so that's the way that you would use the A7 III. It's the way that you'd use the A7R3, the A7R4. Really, before the A7S III came out, if you were in the Sony system and you wanted to shoot 4K for interior video, that's what we would do. We would do 4K 30. We'd slow it down to 24. You get your gimbal and you move like a Tai Chi master, and then you're doing warp stabilizer too, because, you know, these cameras are light enough that you're not going to get all the jitters out of it when you work with it like that. 4K 60 is such a better way to work with these cameras for interiors video that I would heavily caution anybody to not buy a camera that does not have 4K 60. So let me also address when I'm talking about that 1080, okay? Because the other obvious question is, well, can't I just shoot at 1080? Or can I shoot at 1080 and then upscale it? It has been my experience with the Sony cameras that I have tried to shoot 1080 at 60 with, and let me qualify this by saying I haven't done that in a while because I've been shooting 4K 60 for the past few years. The 1080 isn't all that good. And so it's not just that it's a lower resolution, but it's a lower resolution, kind of less dynamic, rangy, kind of soft 1080. It just doesn't look great. That may be remedied in, say, like the A7 IV and the A1. I just haven't done it. I haven't tried it because I have 4K 60 as an option. So I personally believe the better way to go would be using the A74 here. The better way to go would be to get a lens that is going to give you a proper perspective with the crop. As far as the 11mm lens is concerned, I have seen a few reviews on it, and it is not a very well corrected lens. Now, that could be, I'm talking about barrel distortion, that could be certainly remedied with in-camera profiles. I don't have the lens, so I don't know how well that works and how well it doesn't. I have just so far on the A74 shooting real estate video used the 12mm Zeiss to it. It looks very nice, and so, you know, that's the one that I would recommend right now. The other one that you'd mentioned is the 10-20 f4. And is there a way to get around the f4? No, I mean, it's f4. It's always going to be f4. Now, like I'd said before, okay, there's nothing particularly wrong with an f4 lens, because with interiors video, a lot of the time, you know, with the wide shots, we typically want everything in focus anyway. But you are going to go down to f4, you know, and that's just a matter of letting enough light into the sensor. And so you don't want to be cranking the ISO on these Sony bodies. They're not particularly clean. Once you do that, you start raising the shadows. And so you're going to want to stick to the base ISOs as much as you can, and that means opening up that iris on the lens. And when you do that, in order to get your focal plane correct, that's where the tracking autofocus on these bodies really comes in handy, because you can, you know, kind of knowing depth of field charts and sensor sizes and things like that, you know, you can know that if you focus on something halfway through the room as you're pushing in, or you focus on a back wall as you're panning, you know, you can use those shallow depth of field apertures effectively like that. So that's probably enough to not make a video go too long. And my kids just returned and are making all kinds of noise, so I'm going to sign off right now, and I'll see you again. Peace.